In the meantime, folks certainly are firing up the grill this July 4th weekend, but will sky-high prices for items like burgers and steaks make them choke? Diana Furcut-Ross says those are the inflationary underpinnings she worries about. Why?
Well, because inflation over the historical record has always started with food. And people say it's nothing to worry about, it's just food. But the food inflation over the past year has been 2.5. We're talking about those burgers and steaks, meat and poultry and fish and eggs, 7.7% over the past year. Food eaten at home, 2.7%. These are numbers that are going to start cutting into consumer spending.
But they've been around a while, Diana. So the contrary argument, what you're saying is that, well, we've either adjusted or gone to cheaper meats or cheaper foodstuffs when this kind of thing happens. So if it's a worry, it would have evidenced itself by now. You say not necessarily.
Well, we can see that over the past 4 months, inflation has been picking up. And what's interesting is that Janet Yellen, or rather Janet Yellen's predecessor, Ben Bernanke, said that when inflation got to about 2%, they would start to consider raising interest rates. Well, we're at that point now. The unemployment rate is 6.1%. Bernanke said when it was 6.5%, they would consider tightening up on monetary policy. See, that's what worries me, Diana.
That's what worries me, because you're quite right.
It shouldn't worry you. It shouldn't worry you because gradual tightening would be good for the economy.
But here's why I do. I think the Fed risks falling behind the curve, and I think this inflation, albeit limited to some food groups and all, is going to be a worry. And I fear the bond market and these low interest rates are themselves the next percolating bubble. Am I right?
Well, you are, as always, right, Neil. And I think what's important to note is that when the Fed tightened up in the early 1990s, we saw a big spurt of growth, because you can never depreciate your currency down to growth. This gives the Fed an excuse to start gradually tightening up. And okay, the market might adjust to begin with, but afterwards we're going to get a lot more investment. We're going to get a lot more economic growth afterwards as our currency tightens.
When does that happen, you think?
Well, in the 1990s, it happened after about a year, and we got a big run-up in growth in the 1990s, and the Fed was raising interest rates.
All right. We'll see. A year, maybe. A year. Diana, thank you very, very much.